Hi guys, I'm Richard Various, and this is the second episode of Various Things. This is a weekly short format podcast about anything and everything. So I was walking in the park the other day and the thought occurred to me. Can plants feel pain? Turns out they can, sort of. It seems a bit absurd, doesn't it? That plants feel anything. But when you think about it, why wouldn't they? Anybody who's watched a field of sunflowers track the sun throughout the day will understand how plants are able to react to external stimuli. Above the ground, they reach for the sun, and underground, their roots seek out water and nutrients. This is pretty basic stuff. To most people, it wouldn't really equate to feelings as we understand them. But scientists believe that plants react to the outside world in a far more sophisticated way than we give them credit for. I did some research on this topic, which is known in scientific circles as plant perception, and I found an interesting article on the How Stuff Works website. I'll link to it and all the other articles I mention in this week's episode in the show notes. In 2014, researchers at the University of Missouri conducted an experiment. They used caterpillars, extremely sensitive microphones, and 3 groups of plants. The researchers recorded the sounds of the caterpillars eating the leaves of the first group of plants, and then they played those sounds back to the second group, who reacted in the same way as the first. The second group released a chemical defense designed to deter the caterpillars from eating them. The third group was used as a control. No caterpillars, no recordings, and they didn't react at all. For the researchers, this meant that the plants were able to respond to auditory stimuli through a kind of primitive hearing sense. I did some more reading, and if you think plant hearing is cool, get a load of this. It turns out that land-based plants use fungi to communicate with each other. Nick Fleming wrote a great article about this for the BBC. In it, he talks about how, in exchange for food in the form of carbohydrates, fungi growing beneath the soil provide plants with nutrients in the form of minerals like nitrogen and phosphorus. Back in the late 90s, Canadian scientist Suzanne Ward discovered that certain tree species can transfer carbon between each other using mycelia, which is the vegetative part of fungi. Other studies have shown that plants can transfer nitrogen and phosphorus between each other in the same way. Some have likened the plant's use of fungi as a kind of natural internet. I'm not talking about a simple LAN analogy between 2 or 3 plants either. Some species of fungi can grow to the size of small cities. And yes, you heard that correctly. So when scientists draw a comparison with the internet, we're talking big networks of information exchange between thousands of plants. So plants can hear and communicate with each other, and that's pretty awesome. They also have a sense of touch as well. Researchers at the University of Western Australia have discovered that plants respond to the sensation of water droplets landing on their leaves by changing how a host of their genes express themselves. What's more, they've proven that plants do this based on feeling the water droplets rather than any other type of sense stimuli. They even tried patting the plants and touching them with tweezers to see if it triggered a similar response, which it did. German researchers have discovered that plants even scream when they're cut or injured. Like the caterpillar experiment, researchers used microphones to record plants releasing gases when harmed, which sound just like screams. Apparently, cucumbers scream when they get sick, and flowers whine when their leaves are cut. Given the nature of plant stress responses, some researchers argue that plants can actually feel pain. In fact, neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and glutamate have been found in plants, though their roles remain unclear. It's important to keep in mind, though, that plants are just that, they're plants. They're different from animals or humans, and anthropomorphizing plants is really just pointless. Nonetheless, you'll probably never look at a salad the same way again. If you want to get a really good overview of how plant perception has been received among scientists as an area of study, Michael Pollan, writing for The New Yorker, examines this contentious point in an excellent article which I'll link to. So where does this leave us? No pun intended. I'm talking about the ethical implications of eating something that can feel pain, even if that thing is a plant. One of the core tenets of a plant-based diet is harm reduction. To put it simply, the argument goes that a plant-based diet like veganism or vegetarianism doesn't cause as much harm as a diet that includes meat. But if plants can know that they're being harmed and respond like an animal does, for instance by screaming, Does this mean that all bets are off? Luckily, we're in a kind of grey area at the moment. We haven't identified anything like a brain in plants or any signs of sentience or consciousness, at least not yet. I would argue that this is an important difference between plants and animals. Animals display signs of intelligence, of consciousness. They know what's happening around them, they have memories. Their neurobiology can be extremely complex. The question of whether or not to eat animals has more weight than whether or not to eat plants when you look at it like this. An animal knows what's happening to them. They can reason in a primitive way about this. At a certain level, they can understand cause and effect. Plants, on the other hand, feel what's happening to them, but that's it. There's nothing else there other than a kind of automatic stress response. This is a bit of a controversial issue, and I love controversial issues. So let me know what you think in the comments. I'll also include links to further info in the show notes for this week's episode on our Patreon page. If you've enjoyed this week's episode and you want to support the podcast, check it out. There are great rewards for patrons, like access to exclusive content, extended patron-only episodes, and more. And you can support the podcast from as little as $2 a month. You can find us at patreon.com/various things. So until next time, this is Richard Various, and this has been Various Things. Bye for now.